Absolutely. Hi, Sean, and thanks for the intro. I see all my panelists have joined too. I'm glad to join the invention-con here at the very end, but we have the most exciting panel. You all have had about 2.5 days of great content on obtaining your rights, on navigating the system, which can be sometimes challenging, and I'm sure have gotten lots of good information. We're going to focus today on then what you do with it then, the licensing aspects. So as Sean said, I'm Dana Colarulli. I'm the Executive Director of the Licensing Executive Society International. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. It's a international organization of about 33 independently run societies, including one that covers the US, USA, and Canada. It has organizations, however, around the world as well. So licensing executives, whether you're inside a company, whether you're at a firm, or you're an individual that just wants to network with folks working in your area of technology to figure out what's the best way to license your technology and kind of understand the trends. LES and LESI, the parent organization, is the premier organization to help you do just that. Like many other organizations, we've had an interesting few months. We've become a bit more virtual. So I will, at the end, also talk about additional resources that you can tap into that are now virtual, now recorded from LES, and I'm sure my panelists will talk about the same. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to give short intros of each of my three colleagues here who are going to talk about the issue. So first up will be Robin Rasor. Robin is the Executive Director of the Office of Licensing and Ventures at Duke University. I got to know Robin because she testified at least a couple times in front of Congress, including recently on the USPTO study on diversity and women inventors. Robin has significant experience in the particularly university tech transfer arena, not just at Duke, but also as Managing Director of Licensing at the University of Michigan, Director of Licensing at Ohio State University before that, and before that even worked for Battelle Columbus Laboratories, a leading U.S. contract research firm. So Robin is well familiar with licensing, particularly on the university side. We'll look forward to hearing from her on that. Next up will be Bob Held. Bob has been in the business of IP since 1998, orchestrated hundreds of IP transactions around the world in multiple industries. He's also been very active in LES, most recently serving the position of immediate past president. He was president last year of LES USA Canada, which is the largest organization within LES. He is president of a full service IP consulting firm, Held Intellectual Property. He recently worked in Telecommunications System, Inc. in Annapolis, Maryland. Previous to that, worked for Northrop Grumman in the electronic systems sector as well as other experience. So Bob is going to be our second speaker. And then third, David. David, you're going to have to apologize. I'm going to have to apologize for pronouncing your last name. David Fedewa.
Fedewa.
Pronounce your last name for us. Fedewa. Thank you. So third up will be David. David's been a negotiations coach, licensing specialist, and founder of Invent Tribe. He's coached more than 160 inventors who successfully licensed their own products, and has been featured in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneurs Online on licensing and negotiation strategies. So between the four of us, I think we'll be able to talk about a wide range of issues. I should add that before I took my recent position as executive director, I was a previous speaker here at InventCon. I worked for the USPTO for about 10 years, running the governmental affairs under both the previous administration and the current administration. I left just about a year ago. So I have lots of experience with this particular event. I hear that today we've had about 500 folks that have been tuning in and listening. So we're excited to kind of end your experience here with our discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn to Robin. Robin, you seem to be joining us from the gym there in your background. Please introduce yourself and give us a few words.
Well, you can't really figure out where I'm from waving the flag. I'm just, many of us here are just hopeful that we will get to see a non-empty gym again at Duke, but not so sure. And just a reminder for those of you who are out there who have a degree from The Ohio State University, I did work, my graduate degree is from there, and also I did work there for a while. I'm probably I'm the different one in the group here because I don't work with independent inventors. I work with, sometimes faculty would consider themselves indentured inventors, because in my 30 years at multiple universities, I deal with faculty, primarily faculty clinicians who develop inventions as part of their research or their clinical work, and then the university owns it. Some of you may be familiar with something called the Bayh-Dole Act, which is actually celebrating its 40th year right now, which gave universities ownership of inventions made with federal funding. However, since they're inventors, many inventors share the same, have a lot of the same characteristics, and we spend a lot of time mentoring them, helping them understand what the potential for their technology is. Is it patentable? Is it copyrightable? What's the competition? And then also a lot of our inventors want to be entrepreneurial and form their own company. So we also, and many universities, not just Duke, have programs to assist our faculty entrepreneurs in, doing their pitch deck, figuring out their investment plan, introducing them to talent, introducing them to management, helping them find investors, helping them understand term sheets and all sorts of things like that. So we do spend a lot of time with our faculty entrepreneurs too. Some are more sophisticated than others. Some have been through it multiple times, and so they don't need as much help as others. So that's kind of the overview. A lot of universities now do this for their faculty. It's not just about licensing anymore. It's about helping them be entrepreneurial as well. And, a license to a startup is still a license. Licenses are licenses. So that's a kind of a summary of my background. 2 big public schools and now 1 private school. But, inventors are still the same.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate it. Next up, Bob, tell us a little bit about your experience and what you bring to the table here.
Thanks, Dana. So I'm not an attorney. I'm an electrical engineer with an MBA. And as Dana said, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, working at a London-based IP broker, then Northrop Grumman ran their IP operations, and then a telecom. And then when the telecom was acquired, I started my own business. And what we do is, and what I've done throughout my history, is work with inventors, exactly like Robin. At Northrop Grumman, there was 125,000 people. Half of them were engineers. At the telecom I was at, again, about half of the company engineers. I've got about 20 clients now. We do anything non-legal. We work with inventors as small as a retired farmer out in the Midwest, up to my largest clients north of 100 billion. And we work with them on figuring out how to either, one, protect the products with the appropriate IP protection, or work with them after they've got their IP and try to figure out how to make money from it, either through licensing, litigation. We work with a lot of different law firms, litigation finance firms, and so forth. But basically, our number one goal is to work with our clients to make money out of their intellectual property.
Thanks, Bob. David, you're up. Tell us a little bit more, and then we'll get into some questions.
Yeah, of course. Well, I started out as an inventor myself. It was one of those things where I, had gotten a couple jobs when I was just out of college and really didn't like them and was trying to find my way and found that, what did I love to do as a kid? And like I had an inventor's notebook, and I actually still have it. And I was like, all right, how do I make money at this thing? And then figured out my way through it, and ended up monetizing a couple of my own innovations, and then started coaching and teaching other people how to do it. Because there is, in a way, a systematic approach to getting your products in front of the right people and getting yeses. And so that's what I do now is I license my own innovations, and also I help other people through that process of bringing products to market.
Great, thanks, David. And you've built an organization, a company around actually advising those clients.
Yep. So I founded Invent Tribe for that purpose of coaching and teaching and mentoring people through the process. And through that and through my experiences, I've coached over 165 inventors through the process of licensing their own products successfully. And so, and that's, it's fun because, when you go through the excitement yourself, and then you get to go through it again with somebody else and kind of hold their hand through it. It's very rewarding. And you really get to see that joy again.
That's great. That's great. As a veteran of USPTO, I've for better or for worse, my kids have gone to almost every trademark expo and a bunch of other STEM education stuff. My son has an inventor's notebook, so I'm trying to start him off in the right place here. David, I'll have to have you talk to him too. Excellent. I need all the help I can get. Well, I think short introductions. I think what you've seen here between Robin and Bob and David, we kind of and then me, we represent the whole ecosystem of folks trying to support, enhance, and make effective licensing here. And Robin, I'm glad you mentioned the Bayh-Dole Act is celebrating its 40th year here. I think that's important. I remember lots of plans for celebrating. They're now all turning virtual. So come December, we're going to ask everyone to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Bayh-Dole. But the real purpose of it was to try to move technology away from universities or developed in universities and bring those to the marketplace again effectively. Spin them off into organizations. So born out of universities or born out of independent inventors. As you said, the skills are the same and some of the tools are the same. So I'm going to start with, and Bob Held, I'm going to thank you because I'm actually using some questions you sent me to guide, and we might go around and ask similar questions for all of you. I guess the first thing for our audience is, we spent the last two days or so talking about obtaining your rights and navigating the IP system. Okay, so now we have our rights. What are the first steps that we should take in looking at what the opportunities are to license? So, what are the top 3 to 5 things you think that every inventor should think about when they're trying to identify potential licensees and prepare the rights that they just acquired for something that not only can produce revenue but also fund their next invention? So, Bob, do you want to start and help us walk through this?
Sure. One of the first things I would suggest you do, because I run into this a lot with my clients, and I'll give you an example of it, is make sure you do have all the rights in your intellectual property. One is, pull together if you filed patents or trademarks, if you've got trade secrets, if you've got software. If there's multiple inventors, make sure you've got the correct paperwork filed with the USPTO. Make sure you have the rights to convey. Make sure that you've actually identified all the encumbrances, if there are any, if you're pulling together IP more than yourselves. We had a prolific inventor approach us about November last year, and he had 46 patents that he sent us. He said, I got all these patents. I've been doing this for like 40 years, and this is wonderful. And we started looking into it, and some of his patents were litigated and done pretty well. So he's got a pedigree. Well, up and until June, we finally cleaned up his IP in the sense that of those 46 patents, only 6 of them were unencumbered. After working with him, identifying everything that he had done in the past and pulling things together, And then we had to roll them all into one entity that then would license those patents out. So it sometimes takes a while just to get the belts and suspenders together. I run into this, when I worked at the telecom in Annapolis that Dana mentioned, not a large one, maybe $400 million telecom, but it was the product of a lot of acquisitions. And I started with them in 2011, and they said, the CEO said, make some money out of the portfolio. And we start pulling together patents. And then it turns out, well, these patents came from this acquisition. These came from this acquisition. And we've got a non-practicing entity interested in buying these patents. Well, then we got to start pulling the paperwork together. Well, it turns out the paperwork that one of the inventors filled out with the USPTO wasn't filled out correctly. So we had to go hunt down this inventor who had been the CTO of the company we acquired, who now is retired and hunts somewhere in Montana. And it took about 8 months to find him, 2, to convince him to sign the papers, and then 3, move on with that. So I highly suggest before you approach either an attorney or someone like myself or someone like David, make sure you've got it all pulled together. You do have the rights that you think you have, and you've got all the paperwork pulled together for that with the USPTO and so forth, because it'll make things go a lot faster. And the last thing you want to find out, and this has happened, and it actually happened to the telecom, I sold some patents for quite a lot of money to a South Korean company. We gave all reps and warrants that we owned them. They were unencumbered. They went about a year later to sell them to a Chinese company. The Chinese company did a little research on the chain of custody of these patents. Well, it turns out the rep and warrant from the company my company bought, which I wasn't there when they bought them, was not correct. And the patents were encumbered. So now I've got contract breach. That scares me more than infringement. It's contract breach. So now I got a South Korean company we sold these patents to, and I broke my rep and warrants, and unfortunately, they ended up suing us, and we ended up having to settle with them. So, please go through that chain of custody, get all the paperwork done, make sure, especially if you've got patents from another inventor you've pulled into your company, that everything is clean.
Now, Bob, you work in a very crowded space, right? Particularly on the telecom. That's where you've talked through. David, I wonder if you can kind of take this question next. I think in terms of managing, in terms of clearing out your encumbrances, Bob led us through, particularly the telecom side, in a very, I'd say, crowded space. How about you? Has that been your experience? What kind of space have you worked in, and what would you suggest as the top 3 first things that you should think about here?
So, I work with the individual inventor. A lot of these guys, they don't have as much cash to work with. And so a lot of times when I'm working with an inventor, we're putting together marketing material, putting together basically our hit list, basically who we're going to be reaching out to, who are we going to license to, so that we can understand our marketplace. Where is our advantage? Where's our product going to fit essentially on the shelf or, in somebody's distribution chain, and then using provisional patent application, a PPA. And I know, Bob, this somewhat contradicts what you're talking about, because, with a provisional patent application, other patents can be filed within an 18-month window without being publicly in the public domain. And so, with me and the students that I coach, we're actually getting into companies pitching products with a provisional patent application filed, so we're patent pending. There's a window we don't know necessarily when we're getting started. And so, there is a bit of a gray area. So we get into the companies, we make sure they're, number one, excited about the product. It's something that they want to bring into their company. They want to start paying royalties for, so that we know, like, all right, there's money on the other side. Because I get a lot of inventors that come to me with ideas that are sometimes just too far outside the box. And when they're too far outside the box, you present them with companies and they say, yeah, it's nice, but we can monetize this. And it's those inventors that overinvest in their intellectual property. They think, hey, I've got something better than sliced bread.
Yeah.
I'm $10, $20, $30,000 into an IP portfolio. And then they start talking to companies and realize that it can't come to market because of X, Y, or Z manufacturing issues or whatever it is. And so I like inventors to discover those things first, before we get investing in taking that deep dive into the history of the intellectual property. So making sure that we got a viable product in the market under the context of patent pending with a PPA, and then we can start diving deeper and investing more in the portfolio.
Yeah, and I imagine that for you, that excitement, I like that you added that as a criteria. In order to get yourself through this process and to stick with it, you need to be excited about it. You need to be able to show that you can, you focus on the marketing material, show that you can sell your product, so you can show others why yours is different. Not just have you gotten a patent application to show that it's different, a patent, a grant to show that it's different, but also to really kind of differentiate in the marketplace. So I imagine that excitement is so important
Yes.
in what you do.
It is. It very much so. It gives the inventors to break through those brick walls that are always in front of them. When you're bringing something to market that's not in the market, doesn't exist, unprecedented, you got to break through brick walls not only to convince people but to make it a reality. And so you need that excitement and emotion inside. Absolutely.
So Robin, you play the kind of inside consultant to a lot of inventors within the university, and have roles, I imagine, all along the process from invention disclosure. So for you, what do you think about in terms of when you're?
Well, I guess I would say a couple things.
That you want to like?
Well, a couple of things. In some technology areas, I mean, it is different. If you have an issued patent, it's considered so old that no one's going to be interested in it anymore. So if you're working in pharma or some of the life sciences and you have issued patents, it depends. Some people may not care anymore because then, it doesn't have much life on it. So I would be careful about, don't worry about waiting in some cases to getting it issued. The other thing, and hopefully in the last couple of days, everybody's described to you the difference between provisionals and utilities, and that a provisional doesn't have to be some cheap version. A provisional can have all sorts of claims and be a very good patent. So hopefully you've been trained that. If you're working, and I think especially at universities, because we have a lot of students and we have graduate students, and then we have people who go out and create small companies. The encumbrances thing, you may think you know everything, but especially if you're successful, people show up. But I would say the things that we see that scare us the most is when people start collaborating with someone. Oh, this guy's going to help me make a prototype, and there's no agreement. And then they wonder, who owns the prototype? They create a company and everybody's their best friends and everybody really loves each other. And we don't need any employment contracts, or we don't need anything. And then you get into big problems about who owns IP and things like that. If I had $1 for every time someone had showed up in our office and said, hey, can you fix this for me? And then I find out they had no agreements, they had no And then the other thing is when you were talking about, hopefully at some point, someone talked a little bit about some of the things like the business model canvas. So, some people really buy into I-Core and some of these other programs, but at least before you're going to talk to a company, and we spend a lot of time coaching the elevator pitch, but it's amazing how many inventors don't really understand what the product is. It's cool science. It's really interesting research. It's really cool, but they can't even convey what the product is, how it's better than anything else. What are the other competing products? There's nothing worse than there's no competition. And what they need, or how much money they need, or what they want. And I think that the business model canvas does a really good job of trying to focus you on some of these things. But boy, I have sat through a lot of really bad pitches. Thankfully, we make them pitch to us first before they can go out and talk to an investor, because that's a surefire way to make sure they'll never talk to you again.
Robin, can you talk a little bit through, because I think it's interesting for this audience, talk about how you structure the pitches. So how do you structure the pitches that they're going to, in terms of preparing them to go out?
Well, we take out all those data slides that no one can read and is their comfort zone. I mean, we try, you know, and most people do have 8 or 10. Most of you, I'm sure, have a structure that you can help give an inventor for a pitch. But, you know, right up front, what is it? What are you trying to do? What is it? You know, a lot of investors will almost stipulate that the science works. They just want to know what you have. What is it? How is it better than anything else? You can give a little bit of data showing, you know, why it is what it is. And then where are you? How soon is it going to be before, you know, if it's something medical, what's the regulatory path? If it's technical, okay, how soon are you going to be on the market? You know, if it's software, is it ready to go? Does it have open source? You know, and then you can have all those 15 slides at the bottom if someone starts asking you details. Show us more details. Yeah. But you really want to engage them. Unfortunately, I sat through one last week where we had all dozed off after the 20th slide and no one, you know, was going to be interested. So it's really focused, give them a chance to answer. And then I think some people are really afraid at the end to ask, you know, to say how much money they need to move it to the next step, or to say what their ask is, especially if you're going to an investor. If you don't know what you need to get it to the market, you know, they're going to worry about you because you don't know what you need to get it commercialized.
Yeah, those are good tips on the pitch, right? All of those things just to keep your audience. But you know, you actually added to what I was saying before. It's differentiate your product, but really how your product fits into the marketplace, why people will preference your product over someone else, and frankly, when you're talking to a potential licensor, you're also displaying your understanding of the market, not just your own invention, but your understanding of the market and why it will be successful and why they should take a risk on you. And that's certainly important, regardless. It's particularly important, you know, today, in that a lot of the rights in critical cutting edge industries are heavily litigated. So any investor is going to take a risk on you if they see something in the product that you've shown them, and they see something in you as being able to carry it forward. They're much more likely to invest in you going forward. So let's stay on the how do you make your pitch aside of this, and maybe we'll go backwards. David, what advice do you give folks in terms of presenting themselves? You talked a little bit about developing the market strategy, but you're in front of someone who might be interested. You think they might be interested in investing in you, helping you, partnering you, what have you. What are the tips for presenting, best presenting yourself?
So I look at marketing in general for me is really, it's a transfer of emotion. And even if it's data driven, you know, data driven is very emotional because data can create jobs, it can create, you know, money, financial abundance, whatever. And so a pitch to me is very like emotional, it's transfer of emotion. And so when I talk to inventors about it, I say, all right, you've got this emotion and this excitement inside you. When you think about your product idea, it keeps you up at night, or it wakes you up in the middle of the night. Or you read books and you come to seminars, right? You do these things because you've got this emotion and it's starting to spill out into the real world. It's starting to make you take action and now build prototypes, right? And so this emotion that's bottled up inside you, you need to be able to give that to somebody else, because as soon as they see what you see, they have that emotion too. And they start taking those actions within their company to figure out how to make it become a reality. And so, you know, for me in marketing and communicating and presenting your product to somebody else, I don't like to set any rules because the people that I work with are super creative. And so a lot of the ways that it's done, video, sell sheet, slides, but if you say, inventor, you got to do this, then it puts them in a box. and I say, how do you get them to feel the way you feel? And if you can do that, then you've changed them, and they will be committed to your product. They'll be committed to championing your product along with you and pushing that boulder up the hill. And so I do give them not necessarily the box, but I say, if you can't put together a video in less than 60 seconds, you're probably putting way too much in it. Like it needs to be concise. We need to look at the benefits of what you're giving to the end customer. And so I try to say, let's limit the time. And by doing that, they extract all the things that don't matter. Like one of the biggest things I see is inventors come in and they have this long introduction of themselves and how they thought of the idea. And really the company a lot of times just doesn't even care, because they're like, wow, that doesn't affect my end customer whatsoever. And I just spent 8 minutes watching who you are. And so extracting those things really, truly helps, and getting down to that 60-second pitch, and being clear and concise about it.
Yeah, the elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch.
I remember early in my career in IP, I went to a boot camp for startups, and it was a 3-day session that they all talked about. So, what is it that you're going to say? What is it that you're going to say from floor 1 to maybe floor 10? Maybe you'll get to floor 20. Depending on how much you have time, scale it back and really focus on the concise pitch. So Bob, you've both counseled folks, and you've also, I'm sure, made pitches yourself. So what advice would you give for folks to be the most effective as they can?
Yeah, I've done both and done a lot of them. And going back to your comment about the floor 1 folks up to the floor 15 folks, know who your audience is. Who are you pitching to? Are you pitching to the VP of engineering? Are you pitching to the CEO? Are you pitching to the investors? Sometimes if it's a small company, we just did one, small Israeli company we were pitching technology to. It was their investor and the CEO of the company. So understand who your market, who's on the other side of the table, and then vary your pitch for those people. The investor and the CEO are going to want to see, what is it? Why is it better? Why is it of interest to me? Why is it going to make my company or my product better? And then a little bit about, okay, what's the IP? If you're pitching to somebody in engineering and you're trying to work your way up through the company, through the engineering level, you have a more engineering focused pitch. So know who you're speaking to, know your audience, and then develop the pitch either way. You're going to have you should have multiple pitches, for that effect.
And equally, do your research, do your due diligence in advance. Know who you're talking to before you talk to them.
Exactly. Who they are. Find out as much. For lack of better words, Google them. Google the company, Google the people you're going to talk to, and a lot of times you can find previous deals they've done. You can find quotes from them, and when people come to me with something and make a pitch, and they've done their research and they call out things that I've done in the past that may be on my website, or, hey, you're the past president of LES, USA, Canada, we met at a meeting. It gives some credence to it. I listen more versus, as Robin said, everybody fell asleep after a couple of minutes last week listening to somebody giving a pitch because they went off on some data tangent probably.
Yeah. Well, hopefully within Duke, everyone now knows Robin, right? So they know how to approach, and they know. But that's not always going to be the case, right? So I think that's exactly right. And there are such great tools out there now to do that, right? Whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's just a company profile that's out there, you can do your own due diligence on the market and on the players that you're going to approach in much easier ways than certainly it was in the past. So. What about, and this may be something that a session may have focused on earlier in the conference, but it's worth repeating and maybe just hearing from us. When you're looking for someone to advise you, now Bob, whether that's you or David, maybe that's you. There's a industry of invention promotion firms as well, and some are not as helpful as others, certainly. USPTO has spent quite a bit of time, is actually directed by Congress to do some information sharing about firms that offer to help license. We've all seen, for those of us who stay up much too late at night. Ads on TV for call us, give us your rights, and we'll license for them. So as folks are trying to navigate that field, I realize that I need some help. I want to reach out to someone. How do I figure out who they are? And then what questions do I ask to make sure that it's a good fit for me? And I don't, David or Bob, I don't know who would like to take that first.
So, I'll jump in if you don't mind, David. So one of the things I suggest you do is either join professional organizations like Licensing Executive Society or Autumn for the Association of University Technology Managers. Attend the meetings and get to know people. Because at those meetings of LES and Autumn, you've got the whole ecosphere of the licensing folks. You've got inventors, you've got attorneys, you've got owners of companies, you got university people, government people. Danny used to come, that's where we first met at the LES meetings. And you'll get to, and then you'll start to watch the presentations that are made, which vary across the board, and then, but you meet people and then you ask for recommendations. I get probably 90% of my business through recommendations. I have a website, people can find it, but I'm not sure how well it comes up. Most of the people that come to me, whether they're large clients or small clients, come through recommendations from people they know. They say, hey, you need to talk to Bob because, he's worked with, this type of technology before, and, he's helped people figure out the value. And a lot of times we, if it's just a conversation or two, I have no problem helping people, just giving them some input and not, taking it any further. So the one way is the professional organizations. And LES, I'll give a pitch, which like Dana did. I joined them in somewhere around, 99, 2000. And, as a result of going to the meetings, they started asking me to do stuff and, brought me into the fold, and I worked my way up through different, sector leadership positions until they asked me to be on the board and then asked me to be president. And now I'm got a couple months left in my past presidency. But it's those organizations. I went to one of those startup boot camps myself back in 2000. The Guy Kawasaki put together out in Texas.
The exact one that I was actually talking about. That's very funny.
So get involved. Look them up. LES can help you if you approach LES or if you approach Autumn. I'm sure they can help you find people. If look on LinkedIn, as Dana said, and see if anybody is connected to somebody that pops up after you do some research, and ask for opinions. Hey, can you help me? What have you done in the past? Here's what I've got. Here's what I'm looking to do, and see how that emotional connection's made, as like David brought up earlier. If you don't have a connection with the person you're going to potentially work with, then find somebody else.
And I'd say, when you feel lost too, remember that there's also resources at the USPTO,
Yes.
the Office of Innovation Development certainly has office hours, folks you can call. Just if you feel totally lost, you can do that too. David, what do you think? What advice would you give?
I'm going to echo with Bob here on the organizations. There's a large network of inventors groups along with the ones Bob had mentioned. And so looking up your local inventors group, I know I'm in the state of Michigan. We have 13. I run the Michigan inventors group. And we're doing a big event, nationwide event. It's digital next month on the 10th. But I mean, that's the way you can connect with people in person, have conversations and say, what do you think? Some people at these inventors groups, just like Bob said, they've been in the game for 20 years. They've been around the block. They know who to talk to and who not to. And also, I guess the second thing is Google them, Google their name and lawsuits, their name and complaints. And I mean, it just tells you in plain black and white on the internet who's got troubles and who doesn't. And then the third thing, I guess I would say, is track record. Go find people that have a successful track record of helping people bring products to market. And, that's the other part. And then Google that person and make sure they have a clean track record of helping. Because marketing copy can be marketing copy and they can say they have a track record, but so I guess those are the things that I would really look for.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And not only are there lawsuits, but the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has actually done a good job of looking at a few companies that didn't follow through with their promises for inventors as well.
Yep.
So there's lots of good information out there too.
And they're documented on the internet.
Yeah, far too many documents on the internet, right? I mean,
Yes, there are.
I think that really is part of the challenge, right? You'd rather spend your time doing further research, developing your invention, and the help that you're looking for in this part is to allow you to do more over there, and that may be where you are versus building a business. But there is a large source of information out there, and there's folks that certainly can be helpful here too. So I see a bunch
Could
of
I add something too? If you're going to go the route of forming your own company, there's a lot of help that you can get from the SBIR, STTR kind of lots of road shows that the government, the various agencies do. They do a fair amount of helping people write those grants, helping them understand, what the proposals are. For some of the agencies, they actually, I think some of the money that you get, you can use for mentors or helping you, with licensing and things like that. So if you're going the small business route, I would say, and a lot of the states run these road shows periodically, and it's not hard to find them. You just Google SBIR, STTR, and you can find a lot of that help.
Yep. Yeah, also great resource. And if you can qualify for that, there's lots of educational resources that they provide along the way to make sure that it's working.
They also, all the agencies are very focused on helping, women and underserved minorities as well, who want to be entrepreneurial and form their own businesses.
Yep. Yeah, and I give a shout out to the USPTO, both the studies that they've done recently on diversity of inventorship with the women inventors in particular. I know some of the trade associations also have focused a bit on how do we increase the diversity of inventorship and the likelihood of success for women inventors and diverse inventors. So inside some of those reports, there's also lots of links to good resources. So I think I see a bunch of questions also that Sean's giving me that have come in through email and otherwise. I think we've hit the advantages, disadvantages one can have by hiring a patent broker. There may be more on that side, but certainly we gave a little bit of tips of the things to look out for. I wanted to hit another question that came in that makes me think of the example that we always raise is in the independent inventor side is the intermittent windshield wiper. So the question is, do you recommend trying to manufacture, so you know what question this is going to be, do you recommend trying to manufacture and market a product before pursuing licensing? How difficult is it to get licensing? So the example I'm thinking about there actually was a movie that was created, The Spark of Genius. Greg Kinnear was in it. And it is a story of an independent inventor that did try to manufacture and didn't necessarily have the resources, the skills, or to do so, and ended up failing and someone else taking his invention, and then ended up in litigation. At the end of the day, there's some light in that story where he was successful, but it was a lot of pain all along the way. So what's your suggestion to this one? Do you recommend manufacturing a product? Does it differ by industry? And does it differ by patent? David, you want to take the first crack at that?
Yeah. And I guess when I'm working with my students, the first thing I ask them is, what do you want your life to look like in 3 to 5 years? And because a lot of times the product to manufacture or license question is not necessarily to manufacture a license, because some inventors, like, their desire is to be an idea person. I want to send my ideas out, I want to receive payment for them so I can keep working on other ideas. Other inventors are, I want to build a business and a life around this one idea. And so I look at that question more so as a life or lifestyle question. What do you want your life to look like in 3 to 5 years? And then make decisions accordingly to put that together. And I will say that there's definitely products that lend themselves better to licensing versus venturing and vice versa. And so, you might have that dream to be a royalty check inventor, but your product that you invented that you're working on is more set up for venturing, and you might need to change products or change your idea of what your future is going to look like. And so that's where I go, or that's the mindset I like to put inventors in when they're getting started, so that they can say, this is what I want my life to be like. Because I've worked with, actually just in the business so long, I have friends that when they got started, their idea of their future was being the royalty check inventor. But through the process of, they went and got quotes, and then they filed a patent, and then they weren't getting any traction on licensing, or no companies were calling them back. So like, all right, well, I'll manufacture, 1,000 of them and start selling them and see if I can get traction there. And like slowly they chunk themselves into building a business. And then they're like, how do I get out of this little prison I built myself? Because I want to be that idea person. I don't want to have a business. I don't want to have a warehouse. I don't want to have employees. And so it's having that vision of your future and making decisions today accordingly to make that vision come true. I think you muted.
Bob, do you want to add something to that too, or
I
think good.
So it's an interesting question, because I've had inventors come to me that have spent $300,000-$400,000 on some software and an app and the patent applications, and filing around the world, and they had limited success when they launched it, and they came to us and said, hey, can you help us potentially make money from this in some other way that we're not thinking about. And some of them we've been able to work with them successfully, and others it's a sunk cost, in the sense that we, unfortunately, you spent a lot of money on something that if we had backed up a couple of years and maybe brought us in earlier, that we could have told you that, no, we don't think you should be focusing in this area. We think you should be going down this path. And a lot of times when we do that, we actually do that as a result of the feedback we get from potential licensees or acquirers and/or investors. And we go out there and we test it first and see what people think. If we get a lot of negative reaction, either the idea is bad, the technology that's going into the potential product is bad, or the product's bad. It's not needed in the market. There's not enough of a market for it. So I would suggest that before you sink a lot of money into developing, manufacturing of products is a pretty advanced form of marketing versus just having the IP, having the idea, having a pitch deck. Now you spent X amount of dollars to have something built. Unless these days you can do it, in your own 3D printer, that's different. But bring in folks earlier in the game to give you advice and say, hey, should we be spending this much money? Because I've got inventors that have spent very little, and we've made them very successful. And I've got ones that spent $300,000-$400,000. Unfortunately, we can't get any traction in the market on that technology.
Yeah, and I guess you implicitly, you both kind of talked about this, but so what goes into the license? But your IP, there may be other things that go into that license. It certainly may be some know-how. It certainly may be something else that you build in terms of a presence and visibility. If you've created a brand where you're recognized and your license in there, you're in a very different place. I think most of the folks here probably are at the stage where they have IP, and now it's about how do you build that out. But leave open that there's other value that you can create that might go into a license. It helps me get into one of the other topics I wanted to get into, which is something we spend a lot on.
But Dana, sorry for interrupting, but before we move on, giving that description of who most of the audience is here, and going back to how much you're investing in a product when you have your IP and so forth, depending on what you want to do with your IP, if you've got issued patents and you believe they're being infringed, and you just want to sell them, that's one thing. If you want to try to litigate them or try to create products around them, it's very, very valuable to have an open family member in that patent family. Now, again, that begs the question of continuing to spend money on continuations. But for a couple $1,000s, you can file a continuation and keep things open. I've had a lot of clients come to me and they have just, 3 or 4 patents, and, the family closed, they, didn't move anywhere. And we approach people and they say, if you've got no open family members, we're not interested. Because it doesn't give the acquirer or the licensee the ability to manipulate those claims to further protect their product, or if it's, let's say it's litigable, to actually go after infringers by, enhancing the claims. So again, there's that whole, do I spend money? Do I not spend money? Because I've already spent 20, 25K to get a US patent. Do I want to keep it open? Get some input, before you close out the family, because it significantly alters the value proposition when you have a closed patent family.
If you're licensing to someone who sees, oh, well, you have a portfolio, but if I want to continue to do work in this area, there's an ability for me to continue filing additional applications and building a portfolio around that technology.
Based on the original spec. Yep.
So related to that is the topic of valuation, right? And figuring out how do you value the rights that go into the license. So what resources are out there for those inventors who are trying to get a better sense? We've talked a lot about kind of building the market, knowing the market. The dollars and cents should come somewhat in that research. What other resources are out there to effectively value and communicate the value of your license to a prospective licensor?
I guess I can jump in on it.
Well, universities are different. I mean, we have our own benchmarks, but it really probably is going to help independent inventors.
Okay.
And
David?
Well, so at the stage, a lot of the times my inventors are getting in front of companies. There's no data. Like, they've presented a prototype with a PPA filed. So there's no sales. And so a lot of it is the negotiations based on the perception of value. And a lot of times that comes from the confidence of the inventor coming to them and either making proposals or discussing terms. And so at the stage that a lot of my inventors are, and even myself are doing deals, we don't have any hard numbers. We don't have any data to go off of. And that's why, a royalty deal is usually what comes of it with, a lot of times the company or licensee investing in the intellectual property or making a small upfront payment to kind of kick off things. And then, usually between a 3 and 7% royalty. And most of the stuff that I'm helping people with are consumer products, physical consumer products. And so, and we always figure out a middle ground that both parties are excited to move forward with.
Great.
I thought you were asking about databases. I mean, I think the thing you should do is you should look at, it's not that, if there's any competing products, of course, you want to look at those and see if you can find any information about what their sales are. It's useful to know what you think your sales are going to be and see if there's any other deals. If you're in the business of software or some other things like that, often what we do is step back and say, okay, how much would it cost the licensee to build this, or how much would it cost them to do this themselves, and then figure out, an appropriate number. I'm sort of surprised you guys are all talking about, I would suspect a lot of independent vendors also are happy to negotiate, as are we, a one-time payment or a non-royalty deal. I think you shouldn't discount that if you can get the right kind of deal. Because sometimes a lot of companies, especially in certain technology areas, don't want to pay a royalty. They would much rather pay a one-time fee. The hardest thing for the inventor, I think, and I deal with this with our faculty, is they are so terrified they undervalue it, because sometimes that one-time payment sounds like a big number, but if you're licensing to a big company, it really isn't. They'd much rather, but you have to be able to say that number and really have the right background for what you're asking. Don't undervalue it, but don't discount that some of these companies would much rather not pay royalties.
We've got a couple more minutes here. I'm going to do, I'm looking at questions that come in, but I wanted to do one last round, and Robin, we'll start with you. And it's I think Sean had said 3 takeaways. I'll give you, what's the one big takeaway that you think this audience should think about when they're looking at entering into licensing? Again, some of them may be thinking about working with university licenses. Maybe they're independent vendors that are looking at various different fields. What's the one takeaway that you think folks should get from this panel as they're thinking about engaging in licensing?
Well, I guess if you are going to do a deal that's not a one-time payment and it is going to be a royalty, you really want to make sure that you put language in that contract that they're actually going to develop your product such that you are going to get a royalty. So we spend an awful lot of time making sure that they're not going to put it on the shelf because it competes with something else that they have, because if they don't sell anything, you're not going to make anything. So that would be one thing I'd make sure if you're going to do a royalty deal, that the company's actually going to develop it or you get it back.
Yeah, good point.
Bob, what's your one big takeaway?
One big takeaway was educate yourself. Do your research. Join these LES and Autumn and other groups and learn what it means to license. Learn what it means to be an inventor or to be an entrepreneur that wants to start up their own company or just sell their intellectual property to someone. Learn about what the meets and bounds are. As Robin pointed out, making sure that the agreement has in there the appropriate clauses that say, hey, if you don't, commercialize this within X amount of years, we get it back, or there's milestone payments to ensure they're doing something. These agreements are complicated, very complicated. And if you don't have somebody that understands the agreements and you're trying to do an agreement with a large company and you're a small inventor, they're going to probably take advantage of you in some ways. So, ask for assistance, educate yourself. There's a lot of free resources out there.
Good. David. Pick it up. What's the big takeaway? What does everyone need?
I get to cap it off. Well, I was going to say education is your foundation, right?
Yeah.
But
Sorry.
And so I guess I have to expand on that because it's true. You don't know what the next step is until you go educate yourself. So go find somebody who's been there, who's done that, and follow their lead, and know that this is an emotional journey, right? There's ups and there's downs. There's failure when you're like, I'm going to quit. Your family's going to tell you this is a terrible idea. Some people are just going to be your cheerleaders sitting there rooting you on when they shouldn't. And so know that, there are those ups and downs and there's other people that have been through it. So go find those people, locals, inventor groups, all these different groups that we've talked about. Connect with these people, talk with them, because, most of the people that are listening and that are going to be successful in this are going to do something unprecedented, right? Something that's never been done before. They're going to create an invention that's not out there and they're going to bring it to market. And so you've got to surround yourself with the right people to help support that system as you start to build.
Something that's new, novel, non-obvious. They're going to do their best to bring their success.
Those exact things.
Yeah.
I see Sean popping up in my window, which is kind of like the big hook. So I'll just say, I think on all of this, just because you participated in the session today, you've actually taken the first step of educating yourself.
Exactly.
And hopefully some of the things that you get from today will make you successful. Sean has promised we've made some of it resources available, including I made some resources from LES available that you can find afterwards. The USA Canada Society of LES is having their annual meeting in October from the 15th to the 20th. It's fully virtual, so like this type of event, you can jump on and participate in some. And as we said, it's a great opportunity to not only do your due diligence on your industry, but also kind of get some good tips and things. I also made available 2 other things. One is a business briefing, short guide that kind of walks you through licensing. There's 3 documents, managing, licensing, and valuation. So take a look at those. And we just recently, LESI publishes a more weighty publication, Les Nouvelles. In June, we did a joint publication with the European Patent Office. It's focused just on high growth businesses. So it's lots of articles about things that you should think about if you're a small, particularly small entity or an independent vendor and growing your business, managing your IP. So take a look at all of those things. Sean, we went over, I'm sorry, but it was a great conversation. So I turn it back to you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, David. Thank you, Robin, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. And as you exit out, I will close up the session. But thank you again for being part of Invention-con 2020.